Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Now, some of the audio and visuals in this video are quite distressing and disturbing, so viewer discretion is advised on this one. So let's have a look. This is the case of Anneliese Michel, born in Germany in 1952, who had 67 exorcisms performed by Catholic priests by the age of 24 when she died. She was the inspiration for films such as The Exorcism of Emily Rose.
Have you ever seen this movie, The Exorcism of Emily Rose? I know it scared me half to death when I was younger, but did you know that it's loosely based on a true story? The story is about a girl that was born in Bavaria, Germany, on September 21st of 1952 named Anneliese Michel. Anneliese was born into a very religious family. They were all Catholic. Her mother and father owned a sawmill that was pretty close to their house, and they would spend a lot of their time there. That would leave Anneliese and her 4 other sisters in the care of her grandmother, who was super religious. Her grandmother would often have the children read religious texts and study their religious texts, and they were very devoted to their Catholicism. Anneliese did have several health issues as a child. She contracted mumps, measles, and scarlet fever all before she was 5 years old. But other than that, Anneliese grew up to be a beautiful girl. She was quiet and very religious, and her classmates all noticed this. It was in high school in 1968 that Anneliese had her first strange experience. Anneliese claimed to not be able to remember anything that happened that day, but her classmates said that she was walking around in a trance-like state. It was later that night that Anneliese woke up in the middle of the night, wet her bed, and felt like there was a heavy presence pressing on top of her. She wasn't able to move, she wasn't able to scream for help or anything, so it was almost like she was in sleep paralysis. It was another year before Anneliese would experience anything else like this, and it was very similar to her first experience. This time she told her parents about it, and they decided to take her to a doctor who then recommended they go see a neurologist. The neurologist ran several tests, including an EEG, which will measure brain activity and help in the diagnosis of epilepsy. But when Anneliese's test came back, they decided that there was nothing abnormal about them. They chalked it up to some kind of seizure, and since the seizures were so far apart from each other, they decided that no medication was needed at that time. So Annalise went back to school and she developed other health complications like having to have her tonsils removed, and she also developed pleurisy and pneumonia. She was then taken to a clinic that specialized in young adults and teenage pulmonary issues. But it was at this facility that Annalise claimed to start seeing visions of demonic faces. She also claimed that she started smelling things like burnt feces. And while she was at this facility, she experienced another seizure, and this would take her back to the neurologist, and they would then decide to put her on a couple of medications to help with the seizures. Part 2 is up.
Nein, ich sag's nicht. Weil eine starke... Halt's Maul! Ja!
Weil eine starke Waffe ist. Gegen Satan
Ja!
und alle Dämonen.
Ja, gegen uns. Ich muss es jetzt sagen.
Der Rosenkranz eine gewaltige Macht gegen
Ja!
Satan und alle Dämonen.
Aber das glauben nicht viele. Die halten es hier nur volles Weibezeug. Zum Glück.
Wer ist da schuld daran?
Wer?
Ihr.
Ja.
Ja. Was Kostbares, der Rosenkranz. Kostbar. Rosenkranzmonat.
Der aus Klingbeerstellen nachnimmt, dem ist das Geld so schade für.
Der kostet ja was.
Bei dem schon.
Ja.
Gut Zeit oder auch Geld für.
Ach so. Die Arbeit.
Ja, die Arbeit geht natürlich vor.
Aha.
This is the case of Ronald Hunkeler, also known as Ronald Doe, who in the 1940s, aged 14, was allegedly possessed by a demonic entity. His case became the inspiration for William Peter Blatty's novel and later movie, The Exorcist.
This is Ronald Hunkler, and he was known for two things: his alleged demonic possession that inspired the horror classic The Exorcist, and his work in the spacecraft technology division in NASA. Roland Doe, or Robbie Mannheim, is a pseudonym given to the young boy who was allegedly possessed by demons in the late 1940s. The story of Roland became the inspiration for the novel and subsequent film, The Exorcist. According to the accounts, strange things began happening around Roland when he was 13 years old. Objects would move on their own, his bed would shake, and he would speak in strange voices. His family sought the help of several doctors and psychiatrists, but no one could explain what was happening to Roland. Eventually, Roland's family turned to the Catholic Church for help. The Reverend Luther Miles Scholes, a Lutheran minister, and Father William S. Bowdern, a Catholic priest, performed a series of exorcisms on Roland over several weeks in 1949. The exorcisms were performed in secret, with only a few witnesses present. During the exorcisms, Roland reportedly spoke in a guttural voice, levitated, and exhibited superhuman strength. He also reportedly wrote strange messages on his body, such as evil and hell. The exorcisms culminated in a final intense confrontation in which Roland broke free from his restraints, screamed at the priest in a demonic voice, and then suddenly became calm and claimed that the demons had left him. After the exorcisms, Roland returned to a normal life and reportedly had no further experiences with possession. He would then work for NASA in the Spacecraft Technology Division. As part of the division, Hunkler was involved in designing and testing various components of spacecraft, including propulsion systems, guidance systems, and more. His work contributed to some of the major advancements in space technology that NASA made in the later half of the 20th century, including the development of the space shuttle and various Mars missions.
Roland Doe. In the late 1940s, Roland Doe attempted to contact spirits with a Ouija board, and his luck went straight to hell. The demon he supposedly contacted possessed his body. During his exorcism, the boy spoke in foreign tongue while levitating in the air. Annalise Michael, After her treatment for epilepsy and mental illness, Annalise showed signs of possession. Over the course of 10 months, over 70 exorcisms were performed. In the end, it wasn't the demon that killed her, it was her refusal to eat which led to starvation. Clara Germana Selle. This South African student was said to have made a pact with Satan. She behaved animalistic and spoke in languages she never studied, two symptoms which led to a documented exorcism. During her exorcism, 170 people witnessed her levitating in midair while the priests tried to cast the demon out. It proved successful. The spirits left her body 2 days later. Michael Taylor. In 1974, this religious man joined a Christian prayer group with his wife and began acting strange. Taylor asked the clergy for help, and an exorcism was performed. It took over 24 hours to cast what was said to be 40 demons out from his body. Immediately following the exorcism, when Taylor
This is the case of Maurice Thorold, who in 1985 claimed that a satanic pact had led to his demonic possession. His unsanctioned exorcism was assisted by Ed and Lorraine Warren.
This is Maurice Thorold, a French-Canadian native who is said to suffer from possession. This video is of his exorcism, which included Ed and Lorraine Warren. Look closely here at his eyes. Watch how they get green and enlarge, while the priest asks him questions. The people in the room said his skin started to split and boil, and that he would spit from his mouth, and when it hit his shirt, it would turn to blood. This exorcism, they said, was a success, and life got good for him for a while. He wrote a book about the ordeal, and once again started dabbling back into the occult. One night, the Warrens got a message on their answering machine to come out and see Frenchie. It was an emergency. When they returned the call, they received the news that Frenchie injured his wife and shot himself.
One of the worst cases I've ever heard was from the Exorcism of New York City. The woman, a young girl, Juilliard, a violinist, and she was about to graduate. She was brilliantly talented, but all of her friends were getting job offers and she had none. And her friends remember always hearing her say the words, "I would do anything to be famous." Well, guess who's listening? It wasn't long after that that she went to bed one night, had a dream, and she said in the dream was the most beautiful man she'd ever seen, naked, another sign, calling card of the devil. And he said, "You really want fame and power?" And she said, "I do." And he produced a contract, and he took his finger and slashed her finger and had her sign it in her blood. And then he touched the contract and it burst into flames and the ashes fell on the floor. So pretty easy to understand what happened, right? But what's worse is her finger was cut and the ashes were next to the bed. So within a couple of weeks, she signs this multinational tour, makes a ton of money, becomes very popular and famous on this circuit. And within a few years, she gets involved with drugs, goes to needles, gets HIV. Now she's dying in a New York hospital. And this whole thing comes back to how this started. And she calls her Filipino mother and tells her the story. And mommy calls the chancery. "I need an exorcist right away for my daughter." So Jim is the exorcist. He shows up and they tell him the whole story from the dream forward. And he says, "Okay, well, that's not good. You signed a blood covenant with the devil. So I'm going to need you to break that with the blood covenant. So you're going to write out the whole creed and then you're going to sign it in your blood." Well, the doctor's like, "She has AIDS. She's not signing anything in blood. Not going to happen." And he says, "Well, then you need to step out of the room because she needs to do this." And she did do it. And she signed the contract, the creed, and she convulses and flatlines and dies. So now the doctor comes back and he's really upset. The mother is out of her mind. They're all blaming the priest. Hysteria goes on for about 10 minutes. And then all of a sudden she jumps up off the table. She's back. And they test her. No HIV, no AIDS. She's completely healed. So she then committed for the rest of her life to only do music that would honor God and to tell people about the reality of the devil and not to make deals with him.
People before and after exorcisms, part 2. Again, as a recap, if you don't know what an exorcism is, it's the belief that there's demons or the devil possessing your body. Priests and reverends will then try to remove that demon from possessing your body through the use of force or other tactics. And many of the tactics used are very brutal. Behind me is a photo of 31-year-old Michael Taylor. Michael Taylor was a good-looking lad from the town of Ossett, New Yorkshire, England. In the mid-1970s, Michael and his wife both started attending a church known as the Gobber Christian Fellowship Group. Long story short, Michael started falling in love with a woman from this church. But when he tried to rizz her up, she rejected him. This caused Michael to strike her and start screaming erratically. And over the course of the next few weeks, Michael spiraled downhill, so people started to believe that he was possessed by a demon. 2 reverends from this church, pictured above, tried to exorcise these demons, but failed. After this failed exorcism, Michael ended up going home and taking the life of his wife, Christina Taylor. After this grisly crime, police found Michael running around the streets without any clothes on, with a red liquid on him, if you catch my drift. There's a lot of details that I can't share here because they're too disturbing, but if you want to look it up and read about it on your own, I would look up the Barnsley exorcism case. Follow for part 3.
Hope you enjoyed the video, everyone. I'm going to wrap that one up for today. If you did enjoy it, please leave a like, a comment. Subscribe would be fantastic. Welcome to all the new subscribers to the channel, and hopefully we'll see you on the next one.